Good evening. Welcome to Carleton Gospel Hall Facebook Live, coming to you on Sunday evenings. Thanks very much for watching. Tonight we just want to take advantage of this last Sunday of 2020. I don't know about you, but it's been quite the year. Some negative, but some positive. People have reacted to COVID and to quarantining in completely different ways. I read today about some people who were being treated for anxiety, and when 2020 hit, they discovered that everyone was in the same boat. They were all suffering the same thing, and as a result, their anxiety went down. So I don't know if that's you or not, but either way, we're happy you're here. What I want to do tonight is take a quick look at 10 phrases from 2020. These are words that are really familiar. We know what they mean. We've used them for years, but we've never really used them in the kind of context that 2020 has brought about. So that's what we want to look at tonight. So 10 words, 10 phrases from 2020. And then on top of that, I'm gonna share with you 5 words from this book that hopefully you'll want to remember. You might not want to remember these, but hopefully you'll want to remember the words from the book. So let's take a look. Let's run through 10 phrases from 2020. So number one, this phrase came up right away in March. They were talking about it before quarantine, and it was all about social distancing. We all knew what the word social meant. We all knew what the word distancing meant, but we'd never really used this phrase combined before. Stay away, social distancing. I know that there was a little bit of an effort to change that to physical distancing because they wanted people to be socially interactive even if they were physically distanced. But if you recall, or maybe not, that didn't take off. So we ended up stuck with the term social distancing. Who knew that it would be such a thing? But along with social distancing came an implementation of technology at a pretty startling rate. You know, companies who for years had resisted doing things suddenly found themselves doing things online. And one of the phrases that was very popular in 2020 was this one. You're on mute, and you got to speak up, and you got to unmute yourself. And so people are fiddling on their iPhones and Androids and devices and Samsungs, and they're trying to find the unmute button, and that's kind of par for the course. So with this, we have a couple of new words with this. Zoom. Anybody go to Zoom church? Anybody Zooming? Anybody Zoom bombing? You ever done that? You go to Zoom, you randomly type in a code, and then you hope that you end up on a meeting. Now that's probably a really bad suggestion, and if your kids try it, they didn't hear it from me. But that's something that people were doing, Zoom bombing. And Zoom dating. Fortunately, I never had to get involved in that, but there was a whole pile of things to do with Zoom. And even though most, or not most, but a lot of people didn't actually use Zoom, but Zoom became a household word. It's kind of like Kleenex. Well, we say Kleenex is actually a brand. What we should say is tissue. But here we are. And the word has become actually a very, very well-known word in our society. So we all knew about Zoom before, but in 2020 it took on a whole new meaning. Now this third word is one that if you're in business, you're completely sick of, because everybody is claiming that they do these things, and they're saying, well, we needed to pivot. Pivoting is, I really don't know what to say about it. It's basically you're here, you're looking in this direction, and you didn't have to change everything, you just had to change course just slightly. And so people were doing their businesses and commercial operations, and it was all in person. And when they when COVID hit and the quarantines hit and they had to go digital, then they just pivoted into the digital world. So it's a pretty popular word. I believe it's hopelessly overused, and I'm hoping that in all the business newsletters I receive on a daily basis that I never read this word again. Which leads me to this other phrase that has also become completely hated and is, I don't even know what it means anymore. It's the new normal. Like was the previous normal okay? Like were we all just fine with the way the world was? Seems to me that, in January, there was what? The U.S. was almost at war with Iran, or is that Iran? And so you've got countries on the brink, and we've nearly forgotten what it was like. And then all of a sudden COVID came along and all of the other problems disappeared. It's funny when you prioritize things in life that after a while other things just they don't matter anymore. And so the new normal was a phrase. We know what these words are, and yet they're used in a whole new way in 2020. Now, we've all heard about the bubble and bubble. And how big is your bubble? And what are you allowed inside the bubble? And what are you supposed to keep outside the bubble? And who is there? And how large is it? And all of these restrictions that government hands down. And so this has become a term. Who knew that this would be a thing? Can you imagine last Christmas if somebody had have explained to you that, you know, you're not going to be able to get together with most of your family and friends. You're just going to have to celebrate at home. I know one of my cousins, distant cousins, he put something on Facebook that showed him and his wife and one son, and that was it at Christmas. And then I think at the other end of the table was a laptop. It's called Zoom Christmas, but bubble is a new one. Now here's another word that we have heard for years, essential. And yet this year, it took on a whole different meaning. Essential workers, essential travel. I always find it mildly amusing when I'm going over the Alex Fraser Bridge or I'm heading somewhere else and they've got those big signs that are above the freeways and it says COVID-19, avoid non-essential travel. And meanwhile, I'm in a traffic jam with people. So I know that I have to travel and it's very important for me to travel, but all those other people shouldn't be on the roads. But essential, there's another word that has taken on a whole new meaning. Along with essential workers, we have frontline workers. And frontline, you know, I always thought that was more of a military term, and yet where are we using it? Frontline, that's the clerk at your store who is actually meeting, 1,000 people a day while we try to keep a pandemic under control. So frontline, that's another word that is associated with this word essential. Here's another word that I think in the business world anyway has been hopelessly overused. Unprecedented. We are living in unprecedented times. Yeah, I know. But every day is unprecedented. It was before March 17th whenever they shut the whole country down and the world down. Everything was unprecedented. But here's another word that we thought we knew what it meant. We thought we knew it, but can you imagine how much the economies have been disrupted, people's lives have been disrupted, organizations have been disrupted in a way that we never even thought possible. And so things are unprecedented. Now, this is another one that, of course, not only did we not hear the word COVID a year ago, but we never even heard this word, the COVID idiots. I hope I'm saying that right. COVID idiots. So we've got these people, and what are they doing? Well, they are completely disregarding any kind of separation between people, any kind of social distancing or any of the protocols that they should. This is the kind of guy, I accidentally walked into a store the other day and I never had a mask on. And immediately the guy at the front said, "Hey, where's your mask?" I just skipped my mind, but I had to go put one on. I couldn't in that case, so I just actually left and went and tried to go back to the van. But we've got this word. It's people who are just going to just push ahead with whatever they're doing, regardless of the people around them. And so we have this new term that's just been completely invented. Now, number 9. Now, here's something that I've seen these kinds of phrases. I vaguely remember them years ago when we talked about analytics. We did mathematics and geography. There was curves, there was analysis, there was all kinds of things we did in math. But I don't really remember it being used this way when it comes to the health of people. Flattening the curve. And I really didn't come across this in the medical field or just in general usage until it was probably in that late March timeframe. When what were they saying? Flatten the curve. We don't want it to go parabolic. We want it just to steady out. And we take action. We distance ourselves to avoid that kind of interaction with people and the kind of spread, the opportunity to spread the virus. I don't know about you, but usually every September, October, September my kids go to school. By October, the germs have come into the house in a whole new way, and I'm usually down for a day somewhere in September, October, not feeling well. My body's fighting something that the kids brought home. This year, I didn't have any of that, none of that. So maybe there is a benefit to washing the hands very frequently, carrying the alcohol sanitizer in the car, doing that little press the button and wash every single time. And so flattening the curve is a phrase that we've used. But here's a phrase, maybe number 10. Maybe it's I don't know where on the list it should be, but I put it last, and it's the word canceled. There have been so many things that have been canceled this year. My nieces and nephews, they've had their graduations canceled. My nieces have. My grad's canceled. If you can imagine going to school and then you start in September, you've got all your stuff ready to go, you've got the plans for the year, and then graduation is canceled. My daughter is just going into grade 12, but at least this year they kind of know what to expect. And so they have a little bit of pre-warning about the fact that it's not going to be grad as normal. How many of us thought that Christmas would be a little different this year? Not a lot of traveling, not a lot of people that interacted over Christmas. And so we're getting used to things being canceled, and there's just such a great excuse for it. Well, it's COVID related. Well, it's this or it's that. But things get canceled. And so we're here. Now we also could look at that on the whole protest side as well, where the whole cancel culture and tearing down monuments to the past and things like that, that's also in there. But I'm thinking mainly just in respect to events and COVID. But before we go, I want to share with you 5 words, just 5 quick words here that come from the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 3. So the previous 10 words that I told you, we hope we all forget. We hope that our grandchildren never ever know what they mean, that they never experience it. But these next 5 words, I hope these 5 words stay with you for the rest of your life. We're going to start off with the last word in this verse, and it's the word sins. Sins. People don't like thinking about this because, if you're like me, you hate that feeling of remember what it was like in kindergarten or grade 6 or grade 10 or whatever it was, and you get found out for something and you get that feeling of being in trouble. Like you did something and so in order to get away from those kinds of emotions, people really don't want to delve into this really basic straight up word called sins. But sins is a really important word in the Bible. It just simply tells us that humanity is broken. And it's not just humanity at large. It's not just all the people out there that are the problem. It's the person in here that's the problem. And so when we look at this word sins, it's preceded by the word our sins. It's really easy to point the finger and say that, well, the government isn't doing the right job, or the company shouldn't have fired me or those people, or there was difficulties here and out there, and those people are struggling and they deserve to get what they got. But when you look at this phrase and you'd add the word our sins, all of a sudden it makes it a little more personal. It's not stuff that someone else has done. It's stuff that I've done. And so this phrase, sins, but our sins. And then we have this word for our sins. And all of a sudden we're introduced to a little bit of a different concept here. We could benefit from our actions, or we could suffer from our actions. I just happen to know that if I go too fast in certain areas, I'm going to suffer the consequences for my actions. I know that if I treat people the wrong way, I'm going to suffer for the consequence of my actions. But I also know that if I reward people the right way, and hey, Christmas is here, and people must have liked me because I felt rewarded. But when people do things, they get rewarded for their actions. But here is this phrase, for our sins. And it leads us to a little bit of anticipation. What's going to happen for our sins? And here's what the word says. died for our sins. Here's our fourth word, died. Well, now this really ups the level of seriousness, doesn't it? It's not just, well, sins, well, it's the white lie. No one really cares about that, or do they? Well, it's our sins. Well, that's a little more personal. And it's for our sins. And all of a sudden we get this sense of we're going to get what we deserve. And then when we read it's died for our sins, we are exposed here to the fullest extent of punishment that could ever be extended to someone. For our sins, died for our sins. But you know, the first word in that phrase is this: Christ died for our sins. Did you know it's possible for someone else to take the pain and the punishment that you deserve for the things that you have done wrong, so that you can go free as if you were innocent, and someone else takes the place of your guilty place? That's what it is. Christ died for our sins. Sins, the bad stuff. Our sins, the personal. For our sins. Now there's something deserving. Died for our sins, the ultimate punishment. But Christ died for our sins. So the story of the gospel is this: that while I told you about 10 words that you should forget, these are 5 important words never to forget. Christ died for our sins. And 2,000 years ago at a cross outside the city of Jerusalem, Jesus Christ, who was born, celebrated at Christmas, his birth is anyways, but there he was as a young man, relatively young man, 33 years of age. He's taken to a cross. He's crucified upon that cross. And there on that cross, he suffers and he bleeds and he dies. And he's suffering for things that he never did. What is he doing? He was suffering for our sins. And he ultimately bears the greatest punishment that any sin could ever bear. He dies. He takes the fullest extent of all of the punishment that humanity could rain upon him. And Christ died for our sins. Now, what is it about this phrase that I am supposed to get? You know, I'm supposed to embrace it. I'm supposed to accept it. I'm supposed to trust it. Do you believe that Jesus died? Well, sure. I think everybody does. He's a man of history. He's a man who lived. He's a man who was crucified under Pontius Pilate during the reign of one of the Caesars. He's a man who was there in Jerusalem, did those things that he demonstrated to people who he was, and he goes to a cross and he dies, and that's a historical fact. But then to go beyond that and say, no, there's something personal here. There's a reason why he died. You know, I don't tell people that Julius Caesar died for me. There's no point. Because although he lived and he did mighty exploits and he did die, his death and his life probably did have some trickle-on effect to the rest of us in terms of where the culture that we grew up in and the kind of government that we have and all of those things, right? People can influence history. But in terms of him doing something for me personally, saving me, forgiving me, telling me that I'm okay and that my sins are gone, no, he didn't do any of that. But Christ did. And on the cross, these 5 words should be ingrained and embedded in your heart, never ever to forget. All of the other words of 2020 are going to fade away, but these ones are going to stick around. Christ died for our sins. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it very much. We hope you enjoyed it. We look forward to speaking to you every Sunday night online here at Facebook. And we thank you for taking the time to listen to what the Bible has to say. Just don't forget these words. Christ died for our sins. Thank you and good evening.